It's this beautiful bay.
Aye.
Now, I've been told that you might know where the mythical Innive might have once been.
It is there, but it isn't mythical. It's very solid. We head along the road here.
Local historian Meg Douglas is going to show David where his family lived.
Well, they were obviously fit.
You couldn't be anything else, could you?
No.
Now you know why I said bring TARDIS.
We could have done with it. I think it's time for the wet weather gear, Meg. It's not...
Thank you.
Beginning to get a bit Scottish this way.
Right, well, a bit Scottish, is that it?
Yeah.
OK, we'll go and shelter in the house.
But I mean, there was... Charles and Catherine had 10 odd kids, didn't they?
That's right.
So I would hope they had somewhere at least this size.
This is the height the house goes. It doesn't go any higher.
As high as this?
Yes.
And they wouldn't want to be as tall as me, would they?
Actor David Tennant is on the set of his latest television drama. Best known for playing time-travelling hero Doctor Who, he's decided to embark on a journey through his own family history.
I guess as you look forward to the ultimate grave, you begin to look, you begin to become a bit more aware of your place in the scheme of things, and how you sort of fit into that kind of line, really, and what's brought you here and what's defined who you are, really, and that you're just one sort of chunk in a chain, really, that goes on in a sort of fairly random progression of DNA that lurches forward through the centuries that define what you look like and what you sound like and how you act and whether you're going to go bald. And am I going to go bald? How's it looking? You sure? And the terrible overweening vanity that you have.
Reset for a take, please.
I literally have no conception of who they might be, so that's part of the attraction, I suppose, just to discover who they were.
First positions.
I don't know anything beyond really my grandparents, and I'm a bit shaky on them, so it's very intriguing to know quite what might have defined us.
And action.
I've come back to Scotland. I'm going to see my mum and dad in Paisley near Glasgow, and I'm going to find out what they know about our family history, because I know shamefully little. I think it's quite a common experience amongst Scots to develop a kind of nationalism after you leave. I certainly feel very particularly Scottish now in a way that I probably didn't when I lived here. I mean, my heritage is Celtic. I'm almost completely Scottish. There's a bit of Irish in there, but I certainly feel like a Scot.
I don't have a key anymore. Hello! Hi! How you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to be here. Hi, Dave. All right. Yeah, good to see you. Hi. So we'll get a kettle on. That's a proper welcome home, isn't it? And Mum's apple pie. Oh, look at that.
Come home.
David was born David MacDonald, but like many aspiring actors, had to change his name to join the Actors Union.
I just opened a magazine because
pop group or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody in a pop group.
Neil Tennant was in Smash Hits, and I just thought the name sounded good.
Yeah, but if you remember, we tried to persuade you to maybe go to a family.
Yes, I do remember that, but I think at 16 I wasn't having any of that.
Well, because parents, when you're 16, parents know nothing, of course.
Quite right.
16-year-olds know everything.
Did you wanted me to be McLeod, didn't you?
Well, you could have used McLeod, you could have used Blair, you could have used any of those names, you know.
David's maternal grandparents were Irish Nelly Blair and Scot Archie McLeod. And it's his Scottish heritage that David wants to research first.
I'm David, nice to meet you. Do come in.
Thank you.
So he's asked genealogist Brian Thompson to help. So far, Brian's managed to trace back to the 1860s to an ancestor called Donald McLeod.
And his job in Glasgow was an ironware. When we go to the census with the name McLeod, we might start to find that he was actually from somewhere else.
Oh.
And I think it might be useful, David, if you want to follow this up.
Yeah.
We could actually go online. You have a chance of finding him on the 1861 census and see what it says.
David can now research the McLeod line through 3 generations, from his grandfather Archie McLeod to Archie's own grandfather, Donald McLeod.
Where do we start?
Right,
Where do
go
I
on
head?
to www.scotlandspeople.gov.uk. Right, we said we'd have a look at the 1861 census. So do you want to try typing in your...
McLeod.
Yes, type in McLeod. Let's go down to see the Glasgow, if that helps.
There he is.
Oh,
Donald
there he
McLeod.
is. Uh-huh.
Labourer
Yep.
from the island of Mull. He was born in Mull.
Kilninian and the island of Mull.
So we come from Mull.
Yep.
I've been to Mull, it's lovely.
Have you?
I didn't know we
it
came from
certainly
there.
is. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
The island of Mull lies off the west coast of Scotland, 70 miles from David's hometown of Glasgow.
I'm going to Mull to find out a bit more about the McLeods. Up until today, I thought that they came from Glasgow, but obviously they have slightly more country roots. I mean, I guess the purpose of the visit is to find out why Donald left when he did, what life was like, whether he left because life was untenable or whether he left because he wanted to go to the city and see if the streets were paved with gold or not. I've always thought of myself as a lowland Scot, really. The Highlands have been something that I know was there, but I've always felt a bit of a fraud aligning myself to them, rather than someone who has any kind of blood claim to being from here. So maybe it'll give me a right to feel all the more Scottish. But I'm intensely proud of Scotland, and that's a purely emotional thing. I mean, I don't really have any understanding of why that should be, but I'm aware that it's somehow locked into my DNA. It seems pretty remote, I have to say. For
Yeah, it is. Lovely setting though, isn't it, over the bay?
Well, it's beautiful, but it's the middle of nowhere.
David and Brian have come to Mull's Kilninian Parish Church to look for clues about Donald McLeod's early life.
1755 over the door.
I saw that. That's just when the place was built, actually. Yeah.
Right, so it was that was definitely Donald's parents' time then.
Yep.
Oh, it's a wee bit in disrepair.
Yes, I believe it's being refurbished.
So it's not a functioning church
Not at the moment a functioning church.
There's
no.
people's heads.
Oh my God, yes.
Are they actual skulls of people? Slightly macabre. This might be a distant relative. Meet the ancestors. Am I trampling on some holy burial ground here?
From what I heard of the story is that the workmen, when they came to redo the floor, they took the floor off and found these skulls. As simple as that. They believe they're medieval, but they've not yet been checked out.
I probably shouldn't be touching this, should I? I'm probably destroying centuries-old evidence that somebody's got to uncover.
You'll be all right, just handling them. Yeah. McLucash, yes. I'm not
David
sure
must
it's
check
what
the
that
baptism
means, if
records
anything, in
to
a
find
way.
out more about Donald's family.
McLeod! Charles McLeod
Oh, yeah.
and Catherine McNiven
Right.
had... What's that?
In Innovey is always a place name after so it must be a place called Innovey.
Had son Donald.
That's it. Yep. What's the date?
1819.
Okay. And ED means EODO. That's the same day, so there we are.
Oh, I see. August the 1st.
Aha. So he was baptised in this church on August the 1st, 1819. It seems that Donald was one of 10 children.
Really?
Uh-huh. 10. Big family. She had children right on till, I think it was 1830 odds.
Whoa!
So she was well into being 40, well
so
past
she
40.
spent the next 20 years pregnant, basically.
She spent a lot of time being pregnant.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
But where on Mull was the family home of Injave?
Right, David, this map is from 1860.
So where is Injave?
You know, I don't see it on this map. But now, there's someone I know who will know where Injave is. She's a local historian.
Okay.
She's bound to know.
Okay.
At least I hope she does.
Yeah, well, otherwise we're a bit stuffed.
We're really going to be stuck.
We've been driving down these wiggly roads for quite a while now. It was a fair way from that little parish church that we've just been in. And that's a bit of a thought, clambering over these brackeny hills with up to 10 children to go and make your peace with God. So I imagine they were fairly hardy people. And poor old Catherine was pregnant from 19 to 40 from what we can see, so it really can't have been much fun clambering up and down here with wains pulling at your skirts and another one in your belly. Hi, Meg. Thank you for coming out to this beautiful bay.
Hi.
Now, I've been told that you might know where the mythical Injave might have once been.
It is there, but it isn't mythical. It's very solid. We head along the road here.
Local historian Meg Douglas is going to show David where his family lived.
Well, they were obviously fit.
You couldn't be anything else, could you?
No.
Now you know why I said bring TARDIS.
We could have done with it. But I think it's time for the wet weather gear, Meg. It's not.
Thank you.
Beginning to get a bit Scottish this way.
Right, well, a bit Scottish, is that it?
Yeah.
OK, we'll go and shelter in the house.
But I mean, there was Charles and Catherine had 10 odd kids, didn't they?
That's right.
So I would hope they had somewhere at least this size.
This is the height the house goes. It doesn't go any higher.
As high as this?
Yes.
And they wouldn't want to be as tall as me, would they?
Living in the village community of Injave, the McLeods were cotters, Gaelic-speaking subsistence farmers. They paid their landlords rent in kind, with kelp from the beach, peat from the hillside, or wheat when the harvest allowed.
Were they completely self-sufficient, or did they...
They had to be self-sufficient. There was nothing else they could be. Potatoes, main crop.
Which they grew themselves?
Which they grew themselves. And they had oats and barley.
Right.
Well, they used that to make whiskey.
Right.
They had to make something.
Well, they had to have something to cheer them up.
Something to cheer them up in the
I mean,
diner.
for goodness sake.
This was their water supply.
This is what they washed and drank.
They washed and they drank and everything. And if...
I feel I should sample it.
Go on then.
Just for the sake of the ancestors.
It's all right, you'll find it lovely and clean.
Well, apart from the bit of bracken. Yeah, it is. It's very clean, actually.
It is very clean, it's lovely.
It's your actual Highland spring.
But they would have a well, they would build a wall around because they'd keep the cattle and the sheep away from the spot where they took
So they wouldn't drink out of that, necessarily?
Well, it's part of that, it's up the hill.
Right.
But I mean, when you think of cows and children, and the pollution...
Yes. Have I just drunk out of a stream that lots of sheep have peed in? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Nice. Well, I'm
But you
glad
see,
I did that.
it's fast flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you are above the dead sheep, which is further down.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yes. It's what is known as...
With that in the skull, I'm going to be lucky to escape Mull without some kind of deadly disease.
You're getting your antibiotics.
Yeah.
But in the 1830s, the McLeod's way of life changed forever.
We've just come down through all the lands that the people of Injave farmed, David.
Right.
And this shows us the big house.
So they were farming to pay this guy here?
He was the one that cleared the whole of this area.
As the Industrial Revolution gathered pace, Highland landlords realised that sheep would be a better use of their land than cotters like the McLeods. The meat and wool were valuable commodities in the cities and factories of the south. So landlords began a process of clearance, forcing families out of their homes. Some used brutal methods, even burning houses to the ground. In Inuvay, evictions began in 1814. Families like the McLeods had their rents raised and were served with eviction notices when they couldn't pay. To make sure they never returned, the roofs of their homes were burned.
I never considered that we had a link back to those times. It's the sort of thing, you know, that the clearances are something you hear about in school. And it feels very far away. It feels like something that happened to people millions of years ago. And of course, it's not that far back. That's what I suppose has been quite shocking, to sort of have traced that link.
Clearances and economic migration transformed the landscape and the lives of its inhabitants. By the end of the 19th century, Scotland's Highlands and Islands had become one of the most sparsely populated areas in Europe.
It's the inhumanity of it that's just a bit bewildering, that people can do that to each other. There's something about finding your own bloodline mixed up in it and going and standing in the places where it happened that brings it home in a way that history books don't quite, I suppose. You know, and seeing McLeod, seeing your mother's maiden name connected to it at such close quarters. It's grim, really.
David's great-great-grandfather, Donald McLeod, left Mull and joined thousands seeking work and a new life in industrial Glasgow.
This would have been the last thing he saw, I suppose, of his homeland before he set off for Glasgow to establish the McLeod line. They were the underdogs and they were right at the bottom of the pile. But, you know, they came through it and they reproduced and were still going. And I'm rather proud of that. It's curious to think that if the vagaries of fate hadn't pushed Donald off the island and into the big city, then our family history and indeed my life could have been very different. So I'm heading back to Glasgow, back to the big city, just the way Donald went, and I'm going to find out what happened to his grandson, my grandfather Archie, who was born in Glasgow but married an Irish girl who was my granny, Nelly. She was a great granny, very indulgent of us grandkids. Was always bringing us sweets and presents. I regret that I never really found out a lot about where she'd come from. And her husband, Archibald McLeod, was dead long before I was born.
Donald's grandson, Archie McLeod, was the third generation of the family to work in Glasgow. But his talent for football took him away from the city to Ireland, where he married Nelly Blair in 1938.
Well, that was where he met, of course, your gran was in Derry when he was playing there.
Right.
She, I mean, obviously that was their sort of big thing, the big romance.
So she was kind of going out with one of the local football stars.
Oh,
She
yeah.
must have been quite...
And she of course, was a local beauty queen at the time.
She was the posh spice of her day.
Well, I would hate to think of your Gran McLeod as posh.
Well, certainly our memories.
I can't possibly imagine your Gran McLeod ever being linked to posh.
But she had a favourite phrase that will live with me till I die. She used to say, "Now, Sandy, God bless Ireland and the Protestant clergy." You know?
Yeah.
And that would come out from time to time.
but we all just laughed.
Yeah.
You know, that was
Yeah.
Nelly.
I'd be fascinated to know if further back in the Blair saga there was anything linked to the Troubles in the early days with our family. Because we were never, I mean, that was never spoken about within the family circle. And I would certainly be fascinated to find
You don't
out.
remember harbouring terrorists under your bed or anything?
No, but you wonder.
Hi, John. Hello, David. How you doing? Well, yourself? Very good. Good to see you.
But first, David wants to find out more about grandfather Archie. So he's come to see Archie's son, John, who knows all about his footballing glory days.
He achieved something which was really quite special in those days in the junior game. He was cap for Scotland.
Hey.
And that's the jersey he wore.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Do you know, the whole cap thing, I didn't think you ever actually got a cap.
Yeah. Scotland versus Ireland.
Right.
1932-33. And that's the jersey he wore in that photograph. That was about 1932.
Where is he?
Can you pick him out?
All the photos I've seen, he's older in, you see.
There.
Oh, right. Still had the slick back hair. That was obviously a permanent feature.
He moved on to Derry City.
And how did Derry City come about?
I think Derry City probably had money that would entice him over there. And these were just typical of the photographs of that era.
McLeod is on the mark this time, scoring against Portadown. So that's him actually scoring a goal.
Yeah, that's him. You were never really interested in football, were you?
It was never a big thing for me. I tried to play it and I was rubbish.
Did you?
So maybe if I'd been naturally gifted like Archie, I might have stuck with it. But partly because of that, and partly because growing up in Glasgow, I always found it safer not to align yourself. You avoid the fights that way, you know.
Yes.
As you know, the whole the sectarian divide in Glasgow, the whole Catholic Protestant thing tends to go along the lines of the football teams as well.
Yes.
I do remember Gran being a little bit unreconstructed in some of her views. I remember she wouldn't have green in the house because she saw that as...
Oh yes, it was...
as Catholic Irish.
Yes, absolutely, yes. That was...
Is that as simple as what it was?
It really was. If you were... You know, I've mentioned the fact that she maybe wasn't quite as strong or whatever in different directions with this divide, but that was one that she was consistent with all her life.
I'd like to imagine that her political beliefs weren't quite as right-wing, perhaps, but...
I would say they were right-wing.
Okay. Well, still loved you, Granny, but, you know, we've got some stuff to address here. Perhaps I'll go to Derry and find out.
Derry City's home ground in Londonderry in Northern Ireland. It was here in the 1930s that Archie McLeod became a local superstar. David's with Billy and Barry McLaughlin, Irish cousins he's never met before, who've supported Derry City for 40 years. This is where his grandfather scored 57 goals in a single season, a remarkable record that still stands today.
Archie McLeod would play here on a wintry day, a wintry Saturday, and the winger would run up here.
Yeah.
On a wet, sodden ground, and a big heavy ball, and he would cross the ball over, and Archie would head it in for another goal.
Yeah.
In the crowd, Archie and Nelly are still remembered by former Derry player Matt Doherty.
So, Matt, I've met you tonight.
Yes.
You played for Derry City.
I played for Derry City, yes.
And your dad played for Derry City.
Correct, yes.
And your dad played with my granddad.
That's right. I must tell you about the day my mother told me about. She was sitting in the stand with Nelly Blair on the water side.
Yeah.
And a few of the supporters was giving Nelly a hard time about Archie, knowing that she was engaged to Archie.
Right.
And they weren't married at this time. And of course, Nelly stood up and walloped them over the heads with her umbrella.
That sounds like the granny that I knew. I have to say that
really?
that would figure. Is it true that Nelly was a bit of a beauty queen? Do you think he sort of noticed? I might go and have a wee chat.
He stole a good-looking woman out of Derry.
Yeah. So would that have been quite a sort of celebrated couple then, do you think?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I like that idea.
Beckham and...
It's posh and Becks.
Posh,
Isn't it? It's posh and Becks. Archie must have had a ball coming here. He must have come to Derry and thought, this is God's country, and I'm a big star here, and I'm going to go out with a local beauty queen, and I'm going to have a rare old time. So, go on yourself, Archie, that's what I say. It's great here. It's nice hearing bits and pieces about Gran tonight as well, because it all ties in with the women I remember, who of course was much older and had lived a life by then, but the idea of her being here and being quite a formidable character and battering people with her umbrella, that all fits. That makes sense. Well, I'm looking for Cluny Terrace, where Nelly, my grandmother, lived and indeed returned to have my mum. I think this is it. This is it. This is 47 Cluny Terrace, where Nelly grew up. She would not like that it was now an off-licence. That would not suit Nelly at all. She'd be right affronted by that. It's weird to think that Mum was born. Obviously not in an off-licence, but that's what I'll be telling her when I go back.
But being a footballer's wife in the 1930s was very different from today. Despite being a star player, Archie earned just £5 a week. The young couple had to live with Nelly's parents until injury ended Archie's career and they had to return to Scotland.
Since I arrived here, the weather has been so nice. It has a slightly fairy tale feel, rediscovering this bit of family history and imagining them all living in this beautiful, sunny idyll. But of course, it's a Celtic country, so it must have rained most of the time. But right now, it's rather nice to believe that young Nelly hopped and skipped along this street with the sun cracking the pavement. She'll have been wet most of the time, though.
But Nelly grew up amidst a storm of sectarian tension between Protestants and Catholics. David wants to explore his grandmother's background and find the roots of her staunch Protestant views.
I suppose it'll be interesting to know how vociferous and antagonistic that was, that world Nelly grew up in, or whether they were just sort of received opinions that were sort of hot air rather than anything more violent, I suppose, for want of a better word. I've never been to Northern Ireland before, so all one sees is the kind of, you grow up with a reports of all the violence when I was a kid, and Derry, of course, was often mentioned in those reports. It seems such a beautiful place, just looking at it completely objectively at the moment. You can't quite imagine that it's a violent place.
Londonderry is still dominated by its ancient siege walls, a reminder that the city has been associated with religious strife and sectarianism for hundreds of years. Ireland was a mainly Catholic country until the early 17th century, when English Protestant settlers were given land confiscated from the Irish. In 1688, Londonderry became the front line of the struggle for the English crown between Protestant King William of Orange and deposed Catholic King James II. The city's Protestant garrison was besieged by the Catholic army for 105 days until relief arrived from William of Orange. The Siege of Derry is still celebrated today by Protestant organisations like Orange Lodges, which march every summer to commemorate the victory over the Catholics. David's on his way to see another cousin, Billy Blair, to find out more about his family's Protestant heritage.
I lived in a flat in Glasgow, and oh, there's the Queen. I guess we know what kind of an area we're in now then. You used to experience the marching season, because the Orange Marches still go on in Glasgow. It's quite shocking to see just on very ordinary family streets these huge murals. My knee-jerk reaction is one of slight kind of horror, if I'm honest. But, like I say, I don't really feel qualified to be judgmental about it. So, I think I've got to try and be as open-minded as possible. Doesn't really sit with my Guardian reader liberalism, though. Seeing at close quarters the world that Nelly came from and knowing some of the views she held, it does make you wonder how involved her father William was in the whole Protestant culture at the time.
Nelly's father, William Blair, was born in Londonderry in 1886. David hopes to discover more about the Protestant community that William lived in from his grandson, Billy Blair.
Thank you. Not far from here, as we were coming in, just round the corner, there's a very, I imagine, a very Protestant area with a big murals on every wall. Yes. With the picture of the Queen and the various, and it was that traditionally is where the Blair family's been from, right? It's a very Protestant background.
My father was, he was an Orange man.
Oh, he was?
He was, aye. I've actually got the regale that my father had worn. Right. That's what they call the sash name up there.
Right, yeah.
And the letters on is actually the lodge he belonged to.
Right.
And that's 1688 is actually the Dermot Lodge.
Right.
And that's out by the graveyard at Altney Gilvin.
Right, right.
So they have a hall out there, that's what they had attended.
Was William in a lodge as well?
I don't know.
Right.
You could probably follow that through maybe through the Memorial Hall.
How did you feel when you were handed that sash?
Not great. Even now, I'm not that comfortable holding it. An orange sash has always, to me, been quite a potent symbol of aggression and of certainly not of outreach and peace and love amongst men. My father, who has been a man of the Church of Scotland all his life, but would no sooner be seen in an orange sash than flying to the moon, really. So it's quite difficult for me to reconcile that with these very lovely people that I met this morning, and indeed with my own grandmother and these other people in my family. I've followed Billy's lead and I've come to Memorial Hall to find out a bit more about the family connection to the lodges, and I'm trying very hard not to be judgmental about it.
Hello, David.
Yes, I am.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Just follow me.
Inside the Memorial Hall lies the historic heart of Londonderry Protestantism.
So what is
Suppose you're wondering where you're coming to.
I kind of am a bit, yeah.
William Temple of the Orange Order has information for David about great-grandfather William Blair. William was 26 years old in 1912, a year of crisis for Irish Protestants. They They were the majority in Ulster, in the northwest province of Ireland, but they felt threatened by Catholic nationalist demand for home rule, a form of semi-independence from Britain. In September 1912, almost 500,000 Protestants signed the Ulster Covenant against home rule.
So this is it here. I'll let you have a look at it.
Ulster Solemn League and Covenant. Being convinced in our consciences that home rule would be disastrous to the material well-being of Ulster, subversive of our civil and religious freedom, we do hereby pledge ourselves in solemn covenant throughout this our time of threatened calamity to stand by one another, and in using all means which may be found necessary to defeat the present conspiracy to set up a home rule parliament in Ireland.
There's something here might be of interest.
Oh, this is the undersigned, is it? I see. William Blair of Cluny Terrace. There he is. That's my great-grandfather. 47 Cluny Terrace. And this is that, isn't it? It's the same thing.
That's the names of the people who signed that.
There he is. We have found him. Agnes Blair of 47 Cluny Terrace. That was Nelly's parents, both of them, signed the covenant. They were convinced that home rule would be disastrous.
David wants to find out why his great-grandparents William and Agnes signed the covenant. So he's come to meet historian Richard Doherty.
David.
Lovely to meet you.
Likewise.
On these windswept Derry walls.
Very windswept, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I've just been, well, I've just seen my ancestors' names on a copy of the Ulster Covenant.
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that tell me about them?
Most of the Protestants throughout Ireland feel that home rule is going to endanger their position within the United Kingdom, and worse than that, they see it as introducing not just home rule, but Rome rule, dominance of the Catholic Church.
And does this mean, because my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother's names are on this piece of paper, does that mean they were stacking shotguns underneath their beds? I mean, the kind of the barely concealed threat of violence in the wording of the covenant, was that very real yet?
I think there was a very real aspect to the threat of violence.
But would a nice lower middle class man and his wife who went to church every Sunday, would they genuinely be prepared to fight?
I think some folk like that were prepared to fight. I think what we've got to try to do is transport ourselves back a century and see what they feared, or try to feel what they feared.
And beyond just a religious fear, did they also fear that they would be persecuted, that their lifestyles would be at risk?
They did very much so. They feared that their businesses would be at risk. It wasn't just
we won't be able to worship the way we want to worship. It was bigger than that.
It was much, much bigger than that. It was a feeling that the entire social and commercial structure and so forth of the country would be affected.
Mm.
That was the paradox of the covenant. You know, in order to prove that we are loyal to the crown, that we wish to remain loyal to the crown, we are prepared to take up arms against the forces of the crown.
Mm.
By 1914, Protestant loyalists and Catholic nationalists were on the brink of civil war. But this conflict was delayed by a far more terrible one, the First World War. In 1914, William Blair was a flute player in the Hamilton Marching Band, which led the Orange Lodge parades. David knows that William fought in the war.
Billy.
Yes, David.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So he's come to Londonderry's Protestant Cathedral to ask band member Billy Cairns about how William became a soldier.
I'm on the trail now of the Hamilton Marching Band.
Yep.
Which I'm led to believe that my great-grandfather was involved in. Yeah,
it was indeed.
So as soon as war broke out, they signed up. Did they? It was immediate.
Yeah, they signed up. You know, you have to remember, in those days there wasn't much work about.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it was common belief that they would be home by Christmas.
Of course.
And here there's no work. They had the opportunity of getting a uniform. boots, pay, and a trip to France, which must have sounded really smashing.
Sure.
The people with no work in those days. And little did they know what was in front of them, of course.
Right.
Now, this is a bass drum that would have sounded left, right, for all the
So this went to
soldiers marching.
France? This drum went to France?
This drum went to France. This was used then as a communion drum for the soldiers. They would have laid the drum down this way. The padre would have put his white linen cloth across the drum, and then he would have conducted the communion service. This went
all through the war?
All through the war. And I have some photographs here and some information.
Right.
And if you scan away down here, you'll find
William Blair, W. Blair.
Yep.
Attached
Attached to
15th Company.
Royal Army Medical Corps.
Thousands of young Protestant men signed up to fight for king and country, hoping this demonstration of loyalty would stop Home Rule. Marching band members like William, who became part of the 36th Ulster Division, automatically became stretcher bearers on the battlefield. By dawn on the 1st of July 1916, William was in the trenches of the Somme.
What would the experience of one of these band members, what would their personal experience have been of the Battle of the Somme?
Well, they would have been held back when the rest of the battalion went over the top that morning. No Man's Land was quite literally a hell because the number of casualties had become absolutely unbelievable.
So they're cowering in those trenches, hearing all this mayhem going on above them and being told that there's nothing they can do about it, just to sit tight.
That is quite literally it. They have to stay where they are until they're given the order to go forward and try to do something for the wounded.
So would they be making decisions in no man's land as to whether someone was worth saving or not?
They would certainly have had to make a decision as to whether somebody was worth spending the time on bringing back. Many stretcher bearers in the course of the war lost their lives trying to rescue other men. There are tremendous acts of heroism carried out by stretcher bearers who, by the nature of their work, were not themselves armed.
On that first day of the Battle of the Somme, more than 2,000 Ulstermen, Protestants and Catholics, were killed.
Just to have lived through that, carnage, to have seen all these mates butchered, to presumably have to have picked some of them up in bits in no man's land. I mean, I guess if you live through that, you just never want to go back there. It's difficult to know if I could have done it. I mean, if they'd known what they were going to, it's difficult to know how many of them would have gone quite so willingly as well. Who knows? I mean, if I'd lived then, maybe I'd have signed up along with everyone else for the jaunt of it, for the adventure of it, because I'd be home at Christmas, so it would be fine.
William returned to an Ulster in mourning. Protestant Unionist families like the Blairs believed Home Rule would falter. Surely Britain wouldn't betray their sacrifice at the Somme. But in 1920, Ireland was partitioned by a border between Ulster, which remained British, and the Irish Free State. The Blair family home of Londonderry was just 4 miles inside the new British state of Northern Ireland. Perilously close to the border, Protestant Unionists felt besieged, just as they had at the Siege of Derry over 200 years earlier. William's father, James Blair, was a member of the local Orange Lodge. In the 1920s, he was a prominent Unionist councillor in Londonderry. David's come to the Guildhall, where James Blair sat on the council.
So I've got the minutes, the council minutes,
from 1917 onwards here, just to have a bit of a look and see if we can find any references to what James might have been up to. There he is in the list of the councillors, James Blair. 20th of November 1922, James Blair was in attendance.
That day, Protestant Unionist vote rigging, known as gerrymandering, outraged Catholic nationalists on the council.
The grievance, which is the gerrymander of the wards done deliberately for the purpose of swamping the Catholic majority. Catholics, being 56.21% of the population, get 40% of the representation, and all others, Protestants, 43.79% of the population, get 60% of the representation. Which doesn't seem like democracy as we understand it today, anyway. James was obviously very firmly on the Protestant side of the fence, which is no surprise after everything else we've discovered. It would seem that the Catholics are feeling very oppressed by the powers that be and are raging against that as best they can.
In 1922, Londonderry had nearly twice as many Catholics as Protestants. Despite being in the minority, the Protestant Unionist Party maintained the power by vote rigging and discriminating against Catholics.
Martin.
Historian Marcin O'Cahoyne has more information for David about James.
Thanks. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm told you're a bit of an expert.
It's the man himself. He seems to have a particular interest in the provision of working class housing in the city.
Right.
Exhibited a very kind of strong social conscience there as well. He argued for wage increases for nurses. He argued for better conditions for the inmates in the workhouse. I mean, he's someone that kind of seems to kind of throughout his political career to have a particular kind of a particular interest in kind of bettering the conditions of kind of ordinary working people.
Right.
You know, so
good.
That's kind of clear.
Go on yourself, Jimmy. Glad to hear that.
He isn't someone who's a kind of an archetypal unionist in many senses, because he was a labour unionist.
Right.
Labour unionists were particularly concerned with working class kind of unionist voter, really.
Right. That's good to hear. Bit of social justice coming through.
In the true sense of the word, he ever proved himself a guardian of the poor. There were many beautiful wreaths and floral tributes, including those from his loving wife, his son William, and family. That's our lot. Grandchildren, Jim, Jack, Nelly and Maisie. That's my granny, Nelly.
Nelly.
He was a big deal, wasn't he? God, it's funny to see Gran's name there. It just brings it, sort of links it all up suddenly.
Yeah.
Suddenly you really feel the line. Some of the things I discovered about James there, I was finding quite hard to take. It's quite hard to be sympathetic when you read about gerrymandering and you read about vote rigging, for want of a better word. It doesn't feel like an understanding of democracy that I would have now. So I was beginning to despair slightly. But in reading his obituary to this sense of social justice that he seemed to have, which makes me like him a lot, of course, so there's obviously shades of grey there.
And having put James in context, it seems even more surprising that one of his granddaughters actually married a Catholic, which apparently didn't cause any family problems at all. Their son was Barry, who took me to the football, so I'm going to go back to see him and find out what life was like growing up Catholic in Londonderry.
James Blair's granddaughter Maisie, Nelly's sister, married Catholic Francis McLaughlin in 1931. Their son, Barry, challenged the discrimination that persisted 40 years after his great-grandfather James sat on the local council.
Hello, good to see you again.
You're very welcome.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Thank you, nice to be
Barry stood as a local councillor for the non-sectarian Labour Party. By 1968, he was part of a mass civil rights movement that had mobilised to demand the end of anti-Catholic discrimination. Inspired by the black civil rights movement in America, it was based on peaceful protest.
So there was a very real optimistic sense that you could change something.
Yeah, and being on the marches was very, very uplifting. That with so many people shoulder to shoulder, you thought that, well, you were making the whole community with you. And that helped.
We are demanding homes, employment, freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. We do not wish bloodshed or violence.
But on October the 5th, 1968, unarmed marchers were baton charged by the police. Support for radical change in Londonderry swelled. By the end of the year, Barry and his fellow civil rights marchers had achieved historic reforms. The Unionist local council, once home to Barry's great-grandfather James Blair, was abolished and the voting system reformed. But sectarian violence escalated. Paramilitaries on both sides began a vicious campaign of attack and counterattack. The British Army was sent in, and in August 1971, internment, imprisonment without trial for IRA suspects, was introduced. For many, this was a civil rights injustice. On Sunday the 30th of January 1972, 10,000 men, women and children joined a banned march against internment. The day became known as Bloody Sunday.
Were you there? Were you?
I was there, yeah.
You were?
Yeah. The march set off, no problem. A lot of children and women and men, and a peaceful march. There was thousands at it. And the objective was to march down to the city centre and have a few speakers. There was no intention from the civil rights end of it for any confrontation whatsoever.
But nationalist youths started throwing stones and bricks at British soldiers. When and why the British Army opened fire is still the subject of an inquiry more than 30 years on.
You could hear the bullets buzzing over your head, and we jumped in behind a wall, a garden wall, and kept our heads down. So I was one of the fortunate people who didn't get injured that day.
You just waited till it calmed down. You just stayed with your head down and waited.
Kept our heads down, and for quite a while, and then most of the action was about 100 yards away from us.
What is undisputed is that Bloody Sunday resulted in the deaths of 14 Catholic civilians, 6 of them just 17 years old.
Did you know people who were injured?
Oh, certainly I did, yeah. Right. I knew people very well, people I worked with. You know, just ordinary people. They were, and young people, all ages were shot. And I knew a lot of them, you know. And it was the city, and you can imagine, and for days afterwards, Derry just sort of died, you know, until after the funerals. Very tragic.
Do you feel that that was the final death of the civil rights movement?
Well, I mean, to me, I felt it changed things a lot, you know. I mean, the British Army coming in and firing on my people, my labourers, and, you know, that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense. I couldn't understand that.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people felt the same way, that, you know, things could never be the same again. Especially from a civil rights point of view. peaceful marching was over.
Right.
There was no more of that.
Yeah. Did you ever march again after that? For anything?
No, I don't think we ever marched after that, no.
It was over?
No, it was the end of it, you know.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm.
3 decades of bloodshed on the streets of Northern Ireland became known as the Troubles. They affected every part of society. Normal life was ripped apart as Londonderry became a war zone. Even Derry City football team, where David's grandfather Archie McLeod used to be cheered by Protestant and Catholic fans alike, were forced to stop play for 15 years because of the violence. David and Barry have come to meet a friend, Jim Roddy, chief executive of Derry City, who grew up near the stadium.
There was utter chaos in Derry at the time. You were going to school and there was literally gun battles happening. And obviously it was a massive loss to the teenagers of that day that they had no senior soccer club to go and use all their energy by supporting them, and obviously energies were then put in other ways, and there was major street violence then, and it was a desperately difficult time to go up.
The young people would have been very vulnerable in the sense that their pals were sort of getting them more involved and more involved, and then you worried about your own kids.
Today, Derry City runs a cross-community football initiative for Protestant and Catholic children, living embodiments of 1998's Good Friday Agreement, signed in the hope of bringing 30 years of sectarian bloodshed to a close.
And you think that can help to heal the city eventually as well?
Oh, without a doubt. You know, when I was growing up, you never mixed. Parents were frightened they let you go too much out of your own area. But these kids are coming here today, and it doesn't matter what their background is, where they come from, they're mixing because they're out playing football.
Well, good on them.
Aye.
It's funny, when I sort of came on this journey, I was imagining I'd find out some fascinating but ancient fact about where we'd all come from. But of course, as soon as you come to somewhere like Northern Ireland, the history is still being written, really. It makes it a more difficult journey to go on because you're having to deal with your reactions to issues that are still very much alive, you know, and dealing with people who've made choices and decisions with their lives and died a long time ago, but they still passed a bit of their DNA onto you, so you now feel like you've kind of got to go back and figure out why they did what they did. You want your family to be people that you'd admire and be inspired by. And looking at someone like James Blair, the whole kind of dichotomy is there, because in so many of the things he did are so inspiring. And yet at the same time, he was entrenched in sectarianism. And I find that difficult to forgive. With Barry, I want to believe in what he believed in. I was very proud to hear him talk about his ideas and his principles, and to hear him how he'd stood firm against becoming involved in any violent activity. And as I head home, it's good to feel that I'm leaving a city that, despite everything, finally feels full of hope.